have announcements. Right, got it. If you have any announcements that you think would be of interest to the wider group about events or things you want to call people attention to, also please use the chat for that, and we will save the chat in case that would be of interest to people. All right, well, today we thought that the focus should be, and the purpose of the roundtable every month has been, we try to take policy questions that are confronting the South Coast, either the activist community or the governmental community or both, and really have a discussion and talk through in some depth the issues involved. And it seemed inescapable that we were going to talk about UCSB housing, which has been an interest for SBCAN as part of what we call the SUN Coalition, the Sustainable University Now Coalition, for about a decade, well before the Munger issue specifically came to the fore. We were involved in work with the university to try to get them to mitigate their growth through an extensive pledge of housing development by UCSB. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. But of course, the Munger project has put all of this on the map. But rather than simply focus on Munger, I don't think there's much need to keep reiterating the various horrors and questions, let's put it that way, about that project. It's widely discussed. We want to put that in the context of policy, but also share with you some possible avenues beyond Munger that we think are coming to the fore. And Jonathan Abood is with us. Jonathan is, I want to give your full credentials on this question, Jonathan. I first met him when he was head of student governance of the residential housing at UCSB. You were chair of some student committee on that. And then you were AS president, Associated Student President, and then became a key leader in Isla Vista Matters, helping to develop the Community Service District campaign. And then now the director of the Community Service District. So that's one hat, but the other hat is you're a member of the City College Board of Trustees, and there are housing issues involved in that role as well. And you've been trying to monitor, and you put out some very good statements about how to contextualize what's going on with the housing situation. Why don't you start off with that bit of the background that you're interested in communicating?
Thank you, Jay. That is how we met. I was president of the Residence Hall Association, and that is actually how I got involved when I first moved here, was in the UCSB Residence Hall issues as a freshman in 2010. So I'm going to cover a little bit history first on how we got to this point, and then some more current details. So UCSB, Isla Vista were developed mainly starting in 1940s, 1950s, when we got the UC campus located here and designated. There wasn't any development here at the time, really, and maybe one or two houses. And there was, it's a well-documented thing that there was a lot of special interests by oil companies and local banks and property owners to ensure that student housing was limited to just the freshman class and just to the main campus of UCSB. And Isla Vista got developed as this boon for private market student housing development. And that that was a lot of the agitation that actually in 1970 around the Bank of America burning, a lot of agitation was actually connected to the housing conditions here locally. Just the quality and the costs. It's always been an issue. Related to this is that the state of California, who's the owner of UC, I would say they fund it, has never made a direct investment in student housing. That's been in the past done from, the most public source has been federal loans from the Higher Education Act in 1960. That's the most public source, though. The state itself, got involved in CSU student housing at one point in the 1980s. They created a revolving fund to loan the CSU money to build housing. And that's actually an idea that's on the table now for UC, but they've never actually helped build housing. And all the enrollment growth at UC is really driven by the state legislature. And that's, bringing us to 2010. And Dick can speak way more in detail because he was very involved in this process of the LRDP. So when I arrived here, our LRDP was, that situation was done. But it had called that, UCSB should build a bed as it grows. But the growth at UCSB has been driven in the last 6 years by the state legislature. It's really, UCSB has some say, but a lot of the decision-making on growth is driven by the central UC office and not even by the state legislature pushing growth on the campuses. So that's how, I said in my statement, like they referred to, that the state never mitigated its growth. It pushed the growth onto the campuses in a very fast manner in the mid 2010s, starting in 2015, really. And has never really accounted for it. I mean, in the past, it never accounted for it. And then even now, when it went into overdrive mode and driving enrollment, didn't account for it. So this led us to a really terrible situation in Isla Vista. I have all these many hats. I'm speaking just as myself or as SBCAN board member today. But in Isla Vista, it's, we've had people living in cars for a very long time. It's just continues to get worse. And as we all saw in the news, that so many students got housed in hotels because there wasn't available housing. And that happened in 2014. That's not the first time this has happened in recent history. When I was running for trustee in 2014, and that was like a reason student housing was such a big topic in that election, was because there was actually an ongoing similar housing shortage. That's when the vacancy rate fell below 1%, and it became such a big deal. So it's not a new issue, I would say, and it's been, and it affects other people in the area where UCSB not having the housing. Even in Isla Vista, families have been evicted from Conquest student housing in the past, before there was a county ordinance protecting it. So it's been a major issue. And right now, I'll tell you, rents in Isla Vista, my rent went up 10%. Almost everybody I know got the maximum rent allowed increase, even if they're staying in their units. I mean, it's really a big problem where the property owners are able to take advantage of the shortage too, and affect a lot of people on the ground. So that's a little bit of my piece and the history. I think I was going to talk about some other ideas moving forward, but I think I'm going to cover this, history piece and how we got here, and kind of really wanted to contextualize that the state of California, funds the UC. There's never been funding for student housing to be built. And the growth is really driven a lot by the state of California, the legislature pushing the growth. And so I think part of it, and is the campus having a responsibility? I think a lot of the responsibility also lies at the state legislature, and not just this one. They've actually done a good job now where they've allocated funding for student housing this fiscal year. But I'm talking aggregate of the last 60 years of policy has led us, to this point.
All right, well, let me pick up on this. So the other context, or the related context, is we've already alluded to. 2010, UCSB announces its intention to grow by 5,000 students by 2025. That would put the student population at 25,000 by the year 2025. But integral to that announcement was the pledge that the entire increase in the student body of 5,000, plus the associated increase in faculty and staff, would actually be housed by campus developed housing rather than impact the wider housing market. And as far as we were concerned when we formed this environmental organization coalition called SUNS, Sustainable University Now, we negotiated with the UCSB on the impacts of that growth on many, many variables, traffic and energy and water and all kinds of other things that growth would impact. And housing was, however, personally speaking, one of the key things we thought we had gained out of this negotiation. Very definite commitments for a scale of housing that would have been historically unprecedented for an employer in this community to actually create. What was proposed was not only new dormitory facility for 5,000 students, but 1,840 faculty and staff housing units to be built over this 15-year period we're talking about. And we were given in a legally binding agreement that was signed by Sun. These things were not only promised, but mechanisms for monitoring were included in the agreement. And similar agreements were signed by UCSB and the city of Goleta and the county, not as specific and detailed as the Sun document was with respect to housing, but all in the same direction. So the bottom line is this. Number one, in 2015, Charles Munger offered the campus a $200 million gift for the development of all the dormitory space that they had agreed to provide in one single Munger project. And of course, and it's important to see that this was very tempting, not only because it's a lot of money, but because it actually seemed to help the campus deal with the fact that the housing that they were promising required a degree of indebtedness that they might not be able to achieve on their own. So that was, I think, grounds for the Munger temptation, you might call it. What was also included, however, in that gift was the requirement that Charles Munger be the final arbiter on the design, or really, it turns out, had a design in his mind that he wanted to make use of by making this gift. And that, one of the things that happened in 2015 was that other planning for dormitory development that was in the LRDP, plans that were in the LRDP to be developed, were put on hold, were frozen, were not continued. The planning process stopped in order, because of the Munger offer. Not that that offer was secure. As you see, it's been taken at least 6 years to even get what the project would look like achieved. Meanwhile, as Jonathan said, the legislature and members of the regions pushed for accelerated enrollment way beyond what had been planned. We should be now at about 21,000 students at UCSB based on the original plan. So we're thousands of students beyond that. And this is true system-wide. And as Jonathan said, there was no provision by the legislature in, they really did force this. I won't go into the mechanisms by force, how they did it. You know, there's reasons to favor that growth, because that growth means expanding opportunity for students to go to the university, but not without the budget resources, including taking account of the housing problem. So it's like a perfect storm. The campus was, before COVID, there were close to 2,000 rooms in the campus dorms that were triples. These are rooms built for two. That was way beyond what they had agreed to do. When tripling was increasing, the agreement we had with them was that they would start planning new dormitories. That planning did not occur. So this is what accounts for the crisis of now. If things were in abeyance with respect to concern about this because of the COVID lockdown, and there weren't students on campus at all. But now that they're back, we've seen the consequences of this series of defaults, of this perfect storm. But there is some, and I wanted to share, however, there's some good news or hopeful possibility in the current situation. The Faculty Senate, which I think has a lot of power with respect to the Munger Hall thing and with respect to the campus failures to develop housing, including faculty housing. And that's the point I should make. Virtually none of the housing that was promised has been developed, including the faculty housing. The Faculty Senate proposed that there be an outside review committee of some sort to review the whole Munger enterprise. And the chancellor has agreed to that committee. I don't know, maybe there's people who are attending today who know more about what the content of that and the substance of that agreement is. But it looks to me like the very fact that that's going to happen has, in a sense, greatly slowed any momentum there might be toward approving Munger. They're not ready to go to the regents and go to the county, the Coastal Commission, which they need to do before the Munger project is launched. There's other things that are, I think, challenging the Munger project, including I believe, the view of, for example, fire officials in the county that this is not a tenable project with respect to fire safety and other emergencies. So, so the Munger project's, shall we say, in trouble. Well, what is, and then the second piece of good news or hopeful news is that the debt limits that historically were placed on the campuses for housing development apparently have been lifted, and the campuses are much freer now than they were even a year ago to proceed with housing developments. And that leads to what I've been told. I'm telling you things that I believe may be true, but I don't have it. I'm not an official in any way in position to know these things for fact. A major piece of the promise for faculty housing is a project called the Ocean Road Project on the street between Isla Vista and the campus. It's a 540 unit development, which in itself would be much greater than any employer has ever done for staff, faculty, employee housing in this region. And it was announced 3 years ago as something they were proceeding with, but they have yet to announce that they're ready to proceed it publicly, as far as I know. But the rumor that I've heard is that they are going to go for approval to that project to the regents in a couple of months. That's seems to address the faculty housing. It's a major beginning in achieving 1,840 units. It's a third of that or less, but it's a beginning, a significant beginning. But there's a piece to that I want to call people's attention to, which is that the campus can build that housing for faculty and staff, but there is precedent for them to use the housing initially for student housing. And 540 apartments with 2 bedrooms could house like 2,000 students. So that's an avenue, perhaps already in development, that's an alternative to the Munger path. There are other sites in the LRDP set aside for student dorm development that are not being used but could be used. There's other faculty housing projects in the LRDP that could be initiated and that could serve the dual function of staff housing as well as initially student housing. And I guess what I'm imagining is the potential there if they were able to go ahead with the projects they'd originally promised, and which we, SUN, and the county and city of Goleta are intent legally to compel the campus to proceed with their housing promises. And we'll, there's a remedy for the failure to do the housing, and that is to freeze the enrollment growth. And there's some reason to think courts could do that based on the legal situation that's confronting us. So now, Jonathan alluded to something else, and I'll mention this as another source of hope. Legislature has committed $1.5 billion over the next 3 years for dormitory development at all levels of higher education. That's nowhere near we know from Munger. Nowhere near what's needed. However, there is a bill, and I believe Monique Limon is one of the sponsors of the bill, that would provide for a $5 billion revolving fund for housing on all 3 tiers of higher education. That's a much bigger commitment. That would be maybe a real start for what Jonathan was calling for, namely that the state step up and provide public support and public foundation for student housing across higher education, but including at the university. So I'm trying, so the legislature is very much a target of what we need to do to take action around this. They have responsibility for compelling the growth. They now have members who are proposing major ways that they can mitigate the growth that they have called for and that they've demanded. But we've got to increase the pressure on them to do that, in my opinion. So we've got all of these avenues at work. The likelihood that the city of Goleta and the county are going to put legal pressure on the university. Sun might be able to do the same or join in that. And all of these entities have been in conversation, negotiation, and interchange with UCSB about its housing issues for a decade. So that's all coming to a head around that. And meanwhile, on campus, we've got student groups, faculty groups, labor groups, all of which are concerned with the housing issue. Not just the Munger question, but what's the alternative to Munger? And remembering that UCSB promised 10 years ago to develop housing on a scale that would have really been, had it been carried through but by now, a major contribution to the housing relief in the housing crisis in our community. And yet they have failed to do so far. All right, well, that's the story. Let's see what questions.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan, if you want to add.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
I was going to respond to the question you had, Nadia and Mark, because I think I have an answer for both. So the first for Nadia is, so if the UC is the one who collects the rents from the students, why should the state be responsible for providing the funding? It's just so that right now the UC's only source of funding to build housing is to borrow money, and that's expensive to do. And so it ends up, they have to raise rents a certain amount to pay off that debt. The state revolving fund would still need to be paid back, but it would be assumedly, lower interest money that's very free money essentially.
I see.
And then they pay it back and it'd go into another project. And then for Mark, does the campus lose the donation if the design is altered? That's a good question. So one thing Dick and I have alluded to, and I think I'll just give a little more detail on what happened here. There was a few weeks ago a hearing of the state budget committee on higher education about student housing, and the legislative analyst's office prepared a statement, a document for that. And that, in that statement, they even admit the state has never done this, has never funded student housing. So that's good that they, admitting the problem is the first step. But they outlined some different ideas in there. One of the things that came up in the hearing from the UC executive vice president, he says that they're not actually tied to Munger's designs. It's kind of confusing because it's kind of different than everything we've heard, was that the money was tied to design. Nathan Brostrom, the executive vice president, says, no, this is not the case. Some other things that came out of that meeting that was good, though, there was the revolving fund, but also the idea that maybe the state needs to fund planning staff at the campuses so that they have more people who are able to do the work of planning for these student housing projects. Because one thing the UC says is we can't handle too many projects at once because we have limited people managing the developers. So that could be a very cheap way of just expanding the capacity, and long term, adding new campuses would probably be the best solution, right? That's what we did for a long time, was build more campuses. But for that's a big picture. Right now, we got to really build the housing here where we need it.
So I think that I've always assumed, it's always been said that Munger's gift was tied to his control over the design. And we don't know what, that's interesting, the quote that you're making. So maybe there is running room with respect to that. However, if he isn't in control of it, then the behavior of the campus is a little bit weirder than even we've been thinking up to now. Thought that they really, anyway, we'll see what happens with that. I should add that Senator Limon is the chair of the UC Legislative Roundtable. It's a body of members of the legislature who represent UC campuses. So she's the chair of this. She's in a unique position of influence. And people in her office have told us that she's been working, that may be why this more generous dormitory appropriation by the legislature has come to the fore. But we've got to keep her aware that about our concerns about all this. So I see, a lot of chat, which I can't follow. Are you following it, Nadja? Yeah.
Yeah, so Katie Murray, it's not exactly a question, but they posted that they wonder if this means the UC will break up the campus into multiple locations at some point. Have either of you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything about that. There's often been discussion in general about having, more auxiliary, locations for participation in the campus. And there have been times when that has been present. I don't know if that, I don't know what to me, we have 3 tiers of higher education, and the UC campuses are overflowing with applications, while the community colleges have been dropping in applications. One wonders why there isn't more emphasis, and I would, if I were in charge of everything, really want to invest more in community colleges, enabling more and more students to think that the first 2 years of college could profitably be spent at a community college before descending on the university.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one avenue, and building new campuses would be a tremendous investment. It's an investment that the public supported in the 50s with tremendous results. And perhaps, and I know Chris's Newfield is coming to us from Brittany in France. He's one of the major advocates in America of restoring public higher education and the country's capacity to provide for it. Do you want to say anything about that, Chris?
No, you summarized it very well, but the thing I guess I would emphasize here is that because of the austerity that UC's been living through really over the past 20 years or more, campuses like UCSB don't have the financial capacity to build their own housing. Hence, magic bullets like Munger and also private partnerships that have been proliferating and in some ways making the Isla Vista situation worse rather than better. So I think that's it's really important to try to solve that problem at the state level. There hasn't really been advocacy for that inside the University of California's senior administrators. It's really been faculty here and there that have wanted to do this, as well as students and folks like Jonathan and you, Dick, over the years. So that, I think, is an internal university problem that also has to be addressed.
Well, I guess I'm hoping that the Munger story has actually awakened the faculty to the fact that they have both a direct interest in the housing pledges that the university has made. A huge investment is promised in the LRDP for faculty housing. It's remarkable. And it would be a great contribution to life in this community if that were done. The plans are, I'm enthusiastic as hell about those plans. But where are they? And what has been the barrier to the development of these plans to me, I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it. It seems like what you just alluded to, the limited financial capacity, that's a general answer. But why is that? Is that really completely the case in existing conditions? And if it is, then what needs to be done socially to create the potential for this? Here's a state, California, where the governor declares there's a 3.5 million unit shortage of housing for the people. Here's a university pledging to create a significant amount of housing, and yet nothing has happened with respect to that for 10 years or more. So that to me is the faculty senate adding, or the faculty organizations adding to their to this mix of pressure would be great. And there's also campus unions that have discussed, I believe, making housing part of their collective bargaining efforts. And of course, student pressure would be good as well.
Mhm.
Is Harold Marcuse, are you still with us?
Yeah, Dick, I am.
I wonder if you could tell us a bit more what's happening with the faculty senate and related stuff around the Munger or anything.
So Susanna Scott, I posted in the chat, sent in her monthly divisional Senate chairs newsletter, a letter that the Santa Barbara Senate Executive Council drafted to Chancellor Yang, which requests this external review panel. And I have heard that basically they will indeed convene this panel. I don't have that for sure, but that is the implication. So that's the latest that I know about this project.
And what do you think are there faculty members or groups that are thinking?
So the offer in the letter to Yang was, please get in touch with us. We'd like to recommend colleagues to you who would be appropriate. But of course, not of course, but it's likely to be a sort of a back channel deal of who gets on that committee. I don't think it's going to be an open process necessarily. Right. I think the actual suggestion made by John Majewski, who was the acting dean for several years and is now just back to his faculty position, I think that might have been a plant to suggest this external committee to sort of give them a backdoor way out of the full speed ahead on the Munger thing. I don't know that came from him personally. I would guess that there was some group that got together and said, hey, let's figure this out. So that's my intuition on how these things work.
So I think there's legitimate criticism always when official entities want to establish a committee to study something. But in this case, I was considering this a rather positive development, because what they're really And it could work exactly the opposite of what people might think. This is a way out of the Munger project rather than a way to validate it. I think we have to assume from what we've been hearing and reading that any experts who look at the Munger project would have, shall we say, serious questions about it, about its validity from so many different points of view. It's already become a classic of what not to do in public planning. So, I think that committee is a promising thing. But of course, I'm known for my naivete. I believe there's possibilities in human endeavor. That's my naivete. Anyway, other chat stuff that
Yeah.
you see. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to make sure we get through everyone's questions, and we do have another item after this.
Yes.
So yeah, but there's a lot of interesting back and forth, not necessarily questions going on in the chat. So if you're keeping up, that is great. But Philip, I see that they have their hand raised. So if you want to come off mute, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Philip. I'm from Fremont Farms, Other Vista. Along with UCSB for COLA, we've been doing some housing activism. In particular, the coming Friday, UCSB YDSA and Food Not Bombs will be giving public comments to the Coastal Commission. And we'll also be reviewing the South Central Coast LCP to present specific violations of the LCP that Munger, specific LCP violations that Munger makes. And I was hoping to get people's support here in terms of like understanding the South Central Coast LCP and for giving public comments.
So Philip, what does LCP stand for?
Local Coastal Plan.
Oh, okay. We were using the term LRDP. It's the same thing. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
It's different. The Coastal Commission, the LCP is basically the set of regulations that the Coastal Commission enforces, versus the LRDP is was specific to UCSB, whereas LCP is for the entire South Central Coast area.
I get it. And is this an agenda item that you're talking on, or this is a public comment time that you're going to be raising these issues?
We are going to attempt to contact the our Coastal Commission representative and try to get this to be an official agenda item. But as of now, it is only going to be public comments.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump in, and I think what Dick and Jonathan were saying earlier, that because they faculty have stepped in and some other people, they're sort of pumping the brakes on Munger for now. So I don't think it'll be going to the Coastal Commission soon, is my understanding. I think there's other steps that need to happen first. But yeah, Megan Harmon is a Santa Barbara City Council member. And she is also our representative on the Coastal Commission. She is supposed to be having her baby this week. So I don't know that she will be super responsive to you before the 17th. But yeah, I see also in the chat, Lee asked if anyone has talked to Megan Harmon about this. We have not at SBCAN. I don't know if others have and can share her perspective or any conversations that they've had so far. But in general, she's a really good advocate for us, and she's very aligned on SBCAN and I think you all's goals. So yeah, if only she were not having her baby right at this moment, she would be a great person to talk to about this.
Yeah, well, she's having the baby in the full knowledge that she's got all these public duties, and I kind of really admire her for what she's trying to organize in terms of her personal life and the public good. So hopefully she's going to bring it off. She's got a lot of energy. And anyway, so please consult the chat. People are putting up announcements and ways of getting in touch with each other. I want to just say that because of our SBCAN's involvement, and we're really the primary organization involved in SUN. If you're interested in helping that kind of effort, certainly you should join SBCAN. Just go to the sbcan.org website and sign up, and you'll be more able to get a lot of the communications ongoing that we have about this issue, as well as other issues that we're involved in. And the other issue we're involved in, and I'm going to make this switch now to the issue of redistricting. And there's several people here. Nadia, I think, might take the lead. Jonathan also, and I see Lee Heller here, have been very active all through the process of mapping. And now we've got a map. And I think we want to get an interpretation of what this map's going to mean for our lives and our community going forward. Nadia, you want to start that?
Sure. I just one more thing on the Munger Hall. I heard Philip basically say that they're trying to get the project denied or opposing the project, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily SBCAN's position at this point. Like, I think the project design as it is right now, no windows and everything, there's obviously we're not in support of that, but I think I at least personally would like to see something be built there, and something that would house a lot of students in a good way. And I hope that the project can be remedied into something that's acceptable to people instead of just like scrapping the whole thing. So yeah, just to say that. And would you agree with that, Dick?
Well, I mean, what I was saying, yeah, if you mean we are committed to having UCSB achieve a 5,000 student housing development, but it doesn't have to be one building.
Yeah.
That would be Munger is proposing a building that's the largest dormitory in world history, and with a density that is beyond belief. It's not just the windows. In fact, there's many other features of the project that are even more frightening as far as I'm concerned. But if the funding that he's promised to help dormitory development could be mixed in with other sources of funding, but giving the campus the opportunity to make its own plans, which is how things should work, that would be great. So
yeah,
we'll
so
see
well, I guess just the danger of the Coastal Commission they might say, no, you're not allowed to build anything on like there. And I don't think that's what we would advocate for.
No.
But I'm not so familiar with that. But anyway, we can move on to redistricting now.
Please do.
So yeah, I can give a general overview of where the process is at. And then I see Lee is here and happy to report. And I know Jonathan and many others are also here who can speak more about the intricacies of the decision. But yeah, we have a Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission made of 11, I believe, citizens of the county from the various districts, and they are the ones who were tasked with redrawing the supervisorial districts in the county. This has been going on for at least a year, possibly longer. And just last week, they have made the final alterations on the map that will be our new county map. And on Monday, they will do a final vote to approve that map. So how it is now is how it is. And yeah, and we can talk about what it means going forward. Yeah, and on Wednesday, they made some small changes or what I heard were small changes, but maybe Lee has a different opinion. But basically SBCAN's position from the beginning of this process was to support the calls to make a stronger 5th district for the Latino representation by including Guadalupe with the working class areas of Santa Maria. And to my understanding, this was the main success of this new map. We also did want to keep Isla Vista in the 3rd district where it has been, but that was not successful. And IV is now in the 2nd district. And the 3rd, I think the 3rd is the district that has changed the most probably. And we also wanted to keep the west side and east side neighborhoods of the city of Santa Barbara together in the same district. And that is the case in the 1st district. So that is my brief summary, and I will turn it over to Lee to add any, anything else you want to add.
Okay, looks like you've unmuted me, right?
Yes.
Just checking because I'm multitasking. Nadja gave a good overview. What happened last Wednesday, 2 nights ago, was basically that Steve Lavanino got drawn back into his district, which he had been drawn out of. And my sense is that was pretty strategic because we're not ready yet to successfully run a progressive in the 5th. And Steve's certainly better than what else might happen up there. If a conservative won, he's not a conservative, he's a moderate. And that person wanted 8 or 12 years in the job. So we should be sort of status quo in terms of the 5th district on representation through 2026, for better or for worse. The biggest change, I would say accurately, is the 2nd and the 3rd. So Isla Vista is now in the 2nd. I don't know, how much that changes, what that looks like for county policy and representation. They will have Greg Hart instead of Joan Hartman. And we don't know yet if he's running next year. He may do something else. But obviously we would hope for a progressive friendly supervisor, and that person would have a very strong chance of winning the 2nd district. The 3rd district is going to be the challenge because Isla Vista is no longer in it. And so now it consists of a good chunk of Goleta, up the Gaviota Coast, includes most of Lompoc now, and before Lompoc was in the 4th. No longer includes the Lompoc Valley or Guadalupe, since, as Nadja pointed out, Guadalupe is now with Santa Maria, and continues to include the Santa Ynez Valley up to, but not, I believe, including Los Alamos. So in terms of, sort of voters and what they're like, it's still probably a more progressive district, but it's going to be a much harder district to win because there aren't going to be 20,000 18 to 22-year-olds packed into a square mile that can be registered and turned out, easily. It's going to be a much more sustained effort to do voter outreach and education between now and 2024. Anything else you want to know?
Well, I wanted to call on Jonathan as a Isla Vista leader type. This was one of the big anxieties we've had of Isla Vista losing its position in the 3rd district. And one of the fears was what Lee's alluded to is perhaps not that fearful, which is that would swing that district away from environmentally progressive leadership toward oil company control. That doesn't look like what's happened. In fact, the outcome, because Goleta now is virtually in the 3rd district, that adds environmentally positive. And the question is Joan Hartman still living in the 3rd? Yes, that would still be her district. So Jonathan, but what's your reaction to this situation with respect to Isla Vista's political future?
Yeah, like we talked about this on the show on Wednesday. It's really unfortunate what happened to IV because usually for 140 some years, we were in the 3rd district, which meant we were in the presidential year elections where, sometimes there isn't a huge turnout, but pretty often you can get, even in a primary turnout, 7,000 to 10,000 people voting, which in 2016 we had 7,500, 2020 almost 10,000. So IV gets a big say, and actually supervisor races often are decided in June, not November. 2016 3rd district was in November, but IV was decisive actually in that race, as we historically have been. But now as a 2nd district moving forward, I think Greg would be an excellent representative for IV given his history here. But in the future, we won't have a big say in that election, because in the second district votes in the midterm years, so 2022, if it's decided in June, historically IV turnout in June has been very low, despite huge efforts. Like in 2018, I was one of the people working on Measure R to fund the community services district. We poured maybe over $45,000 into that race. And it was only on Isla Vista, concerted effort, very intense effort. And one of the biggest deals we could have voted on, we got up to maybe 20% turnout in the June primary. So it will stay a progressive seat, but Isla Vista itself will lose a lot of its voice in determining the supervisor having a say in that race, compared to now where we're a decisive vote. And it is obvious that we are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the commission heard enough about this argument that Isla Vista in the swing district, like the third, and voting in presidential elections for county board as well, meant that voter participation in Isla Vista is remarkably high. I don't think people realize the degree to which this particular student community is on a national scale, one of the most voter engaged communities. And
Dick, they didn't care. They were a conservative leaning commission that wanted Isla Vista not to dominate the voting outcome against Santa Ynez Valley residents. They couldn't have been less interested in student turnout or what it means for them.
I'm certain you're right, but I'm trying to.
Oh, I'm sure of it, because I was there every time and heard the talk. Nobody gives a shit on that commission about student turnout in Isla Vista. I wish they did.
Thank you for the correction, but I'll stick with my idealistic view of what needs. I really felt that it was an argument that I only realized in the last few days could be a powerful talking point. And you're right, it might not have convinced the commission at all. So I'm not really claiming that. But my point is, and Jonathan's pessimistic about whether this situation will be retained. We've got, the benefit here. We have a number of wonderful people sitting here who are surprising participants, and Carmen Lodis, who helped build the Isla Vista as a community from, it wasn't 140 years ago, but quite a long time. Carmen, do you have any comment about IV as a voting bloc, as a community of voter engagement? But you're muted. Unmute yourself.
There we go.
Yeah.
I thought Jonathan's point was very interesting. I was concerned about taking Isla Vista out of the third district and counting on Goleta rather than Isla Vista in order to carry the third district. But I've been assured by other people who are closer to the scene that in fact, the District 3 will remain pretty liberal, if not progressive. So, but the low turnout in June of the midterm years is really a big issue, I think.
Right. And yet, my optimistic naivete tells me there are remedies for that if people can figure it out. So, I don't know. Jay is here. Jay Freeman, you're making a comment now. Maybe you want to say it in public. I don't know what you want to get across.
I was just pointing out that because it wasn't just for that IV got moved into District 2, but then there was a swap of Vandenberg for Lompoc, and Lompoc is more liberal than Vandenberg, which is quite conservative, and so that's part of what I think is offering that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this. Can I make this comment? People can challenge me. Lee, challenge me if I'm wrong. This is a much better map than we might have expected from the beginning.
Hang on a minute. Yes, I would agree that it's a better map than we might have gotten for sure. Obviously, there was a time when we had some more progressive commissioners that we were more hopeful, but there was a really high turnover. Most of them were ours for various reasons. And frankly, the 3 remaining Democrats who were appointed were really not Democrats in terms of how they thought and how they voted. So this is Lanny Ebenstein's map with some tweaking. He called it the Great Compromise. And there, I won't go into the long story of what happened last Saturday, but he told James Kiriakou that James and I saved the county for the Liberals because we figured out they were going to put most of the Democratic voters in Goleta into the second also. So I would say that that move, which the commission did respond to positively, and the movement of Lompoc into the third and the Lompoc Valley, as Jay pointed out, into the fourth, means we have the voters. Now getting them out is the other story. And the really hard work will be, as I said earlier, to instead of focusing on 1 square mile of 20,000 18 to 22-year-olds with a very high turnout because of the hard work everyone does, and with the progressive leanings, we have a spread out population of voters that we're going to have to work much harder to educate and then to get out and vote in 2024.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on this and comments or questions about the redistricting situation?
Yeah,
and I
Mary
just wanna-
Rose has her hand raised.
Say what?
Mary has her hand up.
Lee said a lot of what I was going to say in terms of the swap and the saving from the original map, or the original map they started working off of. There was no way we were going to get 7 votes to keep Isla Vista in the 3rd district, given where the commissioners were and what they had. But the work that was done by a lot of people lobbying and elsewhere to move the western portions of Goleta, which are the Elwood area, and then up to not quite to Fairview, but Old Town Goleta, and keeping those in the 3rd is really an area that is more liberal and more progressive for that. And Lompoc is a great untapped area. I think there will be a lot of work to do to keep Isla Vista going in the June gubernatorial elections. But it's always been a challenge to find something to bring them out in June. So that's kind of where we are. So just wanted to share that.
I want to personally thank Mary and Lee, and of course Cause and others who were so actively engaged in what is an extremely intricate, and it's probably more difficult than chess or a lot of other games that people have been playing, and with a lot more consequence. So I think we're all very grateful for the way in which this work was done. And also I was kind of impressed by the overall level of participation that was demonstrated at these hearings and so forth. It gives me a little hope about, there could be such a climate of cynicism, despair, and so forth, that people opt out of these processes, but it doesn't look like that's quite happening. Is that too hopeful a view?
I thought we had great participation from the community, both and throughout the county, the community from throughout the county. The Republicans were maybe better scripted, but they kept repeating the same words and read their script over and over. And my favorite was when they would email to the commission with the talking points. The email that they received, they would just forward that to the commission. So you could really see where things were going. Jay's laughing. He saw those comments as well. I will say that for the most part, until we got to the very last hearings, the hearings were very civilized and civil. There was the last couple of hearings, the Republicans showed up and really were clapping and booing, which was not what we had. And I would like to contrast our commission. It was an independent commission. We didn't have a lot of control over it. We were much more civilized than what's going on and has gone on in San Luis Obispo, where the conservatives on the Board of Supervisors are decimating the existing districts. And there's probably going to be a legal challenge and potentially even a referendum on the ballot on those districts. They were drawn by the Republicans and adopted by the Republicans. And they would not even let the Democratic members of the Board of Supervisors vote on it. They made the motion, called the question, and they were cut off. So Very different from the two counties, and just San Luis Obispo needs a lot of help right now from the progressive community. So just wanted to throw that out in
Thank you very
retrospect
much.
of where we got.
Thank you very much. This, what you just said, it helps validate having these roundtables. You bring information we need, and we didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. Any other thoughts on the redistricting process? I mean, I just want to emphasize the admiration I have as well for cause for Hazel and for Lucas Zucker of Cause's staff for, their initiative around, the creation of a majority minority district. And they worked very hard on that for quite a long time. And I think we're all going to be beneficiaries of that change.
This is Eileen Pickle. I'd like to say something that
Go ahead.
I've heard on NPR quite a few times that San Luis Obispo County is, well, let's just say I'm glad we're not there. I'm glad that there was so much input, or at least for our Santa Barbara County, because as I said a couple weeks ago, that I love every part of Santa Barbara County. I'm a 5th or 6th generation, and for San Luis Obispo to let their citizens down, it's really sad. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you for that. By the way, people, if you don't realize it, this roundtable encompasses the county. There are people here from all over the county sitting here right now, including Jaime. You want to say anything about Lompoc being now in the 3rd district?
I think we're gonna make an impact because we're 44%. I mean 44,000. So I think we're gonna, and Lompoc has gone left since 20 years ago. So I think we're gonna win it. I mean, that's my thought.
Oh, okay.
Like we have
Dick, I just wanted to note that Sarah McDonald and Lawanda Lyons-Pruitt have had their hands up for quite a while. Maybe you could call on them.
I don't see hands. Oh, Luanda. Now I see your hand.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Dick. Just want to give a shout out to Lee, Mary Rose, Jonathan, Cause, really good work. Really good work. And I was proud to participate. Actually, I didn't really participate. I just
Wanda,
listened.
you were wonderful.
leader. You were
Well,
Wanda should be in that thank you group.
yeah.
I just
Absolutely.
listened.
Don't let her undersell herself to you all. She was a core participant. She was very active and helpful.
Yes.
Well, it's the first time that I've taken an interest. I know it's the first time we've had redistricting, even when the supervisors have done it, but it was the first time that I've really taken an interest in it.
Right.
And I really appreciate them bringing me up to speed. I'm still not there, but well done. I just want to congratulate you all for leading us. It was very difficult and some long days. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And there's Sarah. You want to say something?
Guys, I want, Eileen, can you mute? Okay.
Sarah, you need to unmute.
Now you're muted. You were okay before.
Okay, I just wanted to thank everybody who helped out with this, and I only wish I could have helped more. And we have a lot of work to do, but we've got it. We now know we now have a map to guide us.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Sarah.
Can we hear something? Do we have any updates on the Assembly District Santa Barbara? We have a letter on file asking the state commissioners to hold steadfast and don't be influenced by the Santa Maria City Council because we want this district.
As far as I can tell, the state district here is remaining the same. They haven't made any changes that I'm aware of. So to that piece, we will have this will be an open seat that will be largely Santa Barbara County and the most southern part of San Luis Obispo County.
So when you say the same, you don't mean the same as now.
Not the same as it is now, same as was published.
Right.
The assembly seat as originally published is the state's draft is an open seat. Steve Bennett, the seat will be open, meaning no incumbent, because Steve Bennett lives in Ventura County. And so the district here is Santa Barbara County. It does not have an assembly member, and will be Santa Barbara County and the very southern part of San Luis Obispo County. Very unlikely that is going to change in the final. Of course, the Republicans are suing over the drawing of the maps and have asked the Supreme Court to extend the deadline and a few other things. So, but it's unlikely that piece is going to change.
Yeah, and the state
anything can happen.
The state is still accepting public comment, as far as I know, until I believe next week on this, in this round.
Please put in your comments.
Yeah, you can send them over email. It's very easy to just say you support how they're drawn now, if you would like to. And we are a 501c3 and we do not endorse candidates, but we can point out that Jonathan Aboud will be running for that seat if the districts remain as they are. So that's exciting.
Jonathan's already said that publicly, but you want to say anything about that, Jonathan? Don't campaign for yourself.
Not campaigning, but if it holds, I am running.
Yes, okay. There's one other thing I wanted to make sure we all were informed about, and that is the fact that again, under Cause's initiative, the City Council in Santa Barbara 4-3 adopted a resolution moving them toward rent stabilization legislation. And is Stanley still here? He was here from Cause.
I sat through that whole meeting till the bitter end, if you want me to report.
Who's that?
Me too.
Lee.
That was Lee.
Yeah. I was there till the
You
last
do
gavel
that.
was
I
dropped.
sat through a lot of it, but go ahead, Lee, please. Yeah.
Okay. So what they did was they voted to move forward with city attorney preparing an interim rent stabilization ordinance that would be, I believe, 2% plus CPI, accompanied by a financial study. It was all very vague late at night, and a study of a rental registry. So that's going to take a while. The city attorney would have to write the ordinance. It would have to go to the ordinance committee. There are all those layers. And by then there will be a different mayor. And that only passed 4-3 with Kathy being that fourth vote. So unfortunately, the odds of getting a majority to pass whatever comes back in terms of a rent stabilization ordinance have shrunk by virtue of the fact that she will be replaced by Randy Rouse. It's, what might be most likely to survive would be a rental registry, and we could have another meeting to talk about what that might look like, what role SBCAN would want to play in influencing that to make sure it's as powerful and effective as possible. But my takeaway is that by the time they come back with an actual ordinance, interim or for term, the votes will not be there. Alejandra voted against it, Eric voted against it, Mike voted against it.
Well, they voted. I listened to a lot of that discussion. What I heard was a little more uncertain because they didn't denounce the idea of some kind of rent control, or not all of them did. And I think that a lot's going to depend on public action and lobbying and so forth with respect to those three, but also including the people who remain on the council who voted for it, to define the terms of a legislation that will pass. It wasn't reported very well, what you just said. The actual measure is not 2%, but 2% plus the cost of living index. which as like today announced was the CPI is over 6%. So it's actually not a very restrictive cap in terms of current inflation levels. But I wouldn't say Randy's the only determining factor on how this turns out. It was very hard to understand, for example, what Ms. Gutierrez was really getting at in her advocacy, and Eric Friedman. People, this council, several members enjoy ruminating on the dais, and they really do. They're very, you could say they're very thoughtful, but
Yeah.
the thoughtfulness should have preceded the meeting rather than be in the middle of it. That's my professorial judgment. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think most of the comments that I heard in opposition towards it was interesting because I think they were landlords who were saying, I never raised the rent more than 2%, and I oppose this, which was interesting because if they really don't ever raise their rents astronomically, they shouldn't be opposed to the cap being 7% or whatever. But so and that was what I think really swayed Alejandra, especially. She was worried that doing this would create some sort of retaliation against the landlords who are actually like who have been good to their tenants, which I don't understand that reasoning at all, actually.
Nadja?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to sort of look behind what people say publicly. Alejandra's parents are landlords, and she is very closely tied to Ed St. George. So there's the performative stuff that she was doing the other night, right? Oh, I care so much about tenants. The police have to come out. We should enforce against the big landlords. And then there's her saying, but I worry about the mom and pops. The Santa Barbara Tenants Union, one of their members actually posted on Facebook. It was a little bit inflammatory, but it was true. And I think the post is no longer there. She talks out of both sides of her mouth. And I wouldn't trust anything she says in that setting to be a guideline for what she's genuinely to be trusted to think about and do, because there's all the behind the scenes stuff that they don't say, right? They don't go, well, my parents are property owners, therefore I oppose this, because electeds don't do that.
Yeah, that's a good
with all due respect, yes, that's very important information. I didn't know that about her, but if she is saying enforcement should be directed at, corporate type landlords, then maybe that's a focus that can be developed over time, if that's what she's really seriously interested in. I think that we need to do a lot of people interested in this issue need to do a lot of further research and education. The line that says over and over again, rent control never works, that has to be challenged. There's good research actually that shows that it can work, and what does it work for, and what are the limitations of it, and what else needs to be part of a progressive housing agenda. These are all things that I think we're going to be working on in the next period.
And Kristen Snedden did talk about the Beverly Hills model and asked staff to look at other successful models. So I agree. Supporting that, looking for successful community models would be one way to come back. Maybe flip Eric, maybe flip Mike. Sure.
So any other comments on this? Any other quick announcements that people want to make that they want people to know about?
Yeah, I have a couple, and then if you have something you want to share, you can raise your hand or just shout it out. But two things. First, that Garrett Wong, the county climate person, I don't actually know their title, but he asked that we pass on that the county has released their draft measures and actions for the 2030 action plan, and they are requesting feedback and opinions on them. So I haven't had a chance to look through it, but I will post the link for that right now in the chat. And I think we potentially will also have him come to a roundtable in the future to talk about that. So if you're interested, definitely sign up for our emails so that you're notified about that. And then, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, we will be having another meeting like this at 4 p.m. today to discuss ranked choice voting in the city of Santa Barbara for city elections. So if that is something you're interested in, I'll post the link for that in the chat as well. And Jonathan and I and Christian Alonso from the Santa Barbara Progressive Coalition will be leading that meeting. So yeah, that's it for me.
That's another exciting new thing that SBCAN is interested in promoting the discussion of, and maybe even endorsing. I'm deliberately being open because we want to hear what the various downsides and upsides are to that proposal, but it seems like the time is right for it, very much so. Very confusing situation where people get elected mayor with almost no real support from the majority of people in the community. And we need to, there's mechanisms for dealing with that can improve democracy, I say. Anyway, any other thoughts? This has been, to me, an inspiring meeting, just in terms of how many people came and stuck with it, and the quality of information and conversation that people were providing is just why we have these events. So if you, sorry.
I have one thing, if I can. Just
Please.
Now that we're done with the county redistricting, I think we also need to focus on the various cities that are doing redistricting. And that's, I think that'll be a little more dispersed, but as I recently pulled the numbers for the city of Santa Barbara, and given the population shifts, none of the existing districts are majority, minority, citizen voting age population, Latinx districts anymore. The third district is underpopulated by over 10%. So you really see the shift in the dynamic of the city of Santa Barbara. They're going to start hearings in January. Goleta's already started a lot of outreach meetings. Santa Maria's done some work, and I don't have a clue what Lompoc's doing at this point.
So are they done by the councils themselves?
They are all done. The city of Santa Barbara is done by an independent commission of judges who will be looking for citizen input. What they think of citizen retired judges. This is was the settlement, if you remember, that got district elections in the city. At their first meeting, it was very clear that they are not used to the masses, the public participating with them in any way, shape, or form. They're used to running courtrooms. And then Santa Maria, Lompoc have already had districts. The Goleta is moving to districts, as is Carpinteria, and I think Buellton as well. Solvang is, and so basically all of our districts, plus the school districts, are also doing redistricting. So there's still a lot more on redistricting coming next year, but they are not on the same timeline because their election is in November versus the county's election is in June.
And are we able to benefit from your being a constant monitor of all of this?
To some extent, yes, although it does become overwhelming with all of the cities.
Sounds
so
very overwhelming, yes.
I'm happy to help people understand what their cities are doing to them, but I can't monitor every meeting because often they're the same times.
Well, maybe we can help identify in certain cities, at least, people who could be trained by you or helped by you to play that
But
role.
I think Lompoc will be important because that is, I think, a critical thing, and exactly where the boundaries are in Santa Maria. They were very much drawn to originally for incumbent protection.
Right. Santa Maria is
Santa Maria.
one of the ideal type cases of that kind of.
Well,
district.
but it was also done in response to a legal suit, and
Yeah, right.
you know, as was Santa Barbara, where it was drawn to have 2 majority minority Latinx districts,
Yeah.
and those don't exist right now with the population shift, and that's the changes of losing and honestly gentrification of some of our neighborhoods and loss of population in the Latinx community.
So in January, Santa Barbara City begins that process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they will start having public hearings.
Great. Lee, do you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, you then take it down.
Oh, you know what? It must have been from before. Apologies. I didn't realize that it had
Oh, it's
not been
okay.
lowered.
You don't have to
All right.
apologize. Always ready to hear from you, but if you're not, that's fine. Any other people have any comments? Am I missing any hands? I often do. Okay.
We got Linda Dick.
What?
We have Linda.
Linda.
I just wanted to bring your attention to the very long chat note that I put in there. We would love to invite all of you to join the League of Women Voters on our walk and talk tours around the South County. This is to kind of help with the NIMBYism issue. And we're looking for publicly owned land that could be affordable housing sites, et cetera. So next week, we're going to be in the Patterson 101 part of the county, which is on the edge of Goleta. That's on Thursday, the 16th. And the following Monday, the 20th, we're going to be meeting at the Habitat office at 710 Cota. And that's where they have proposed some housing developments across the street from the junior high. So, and then we want to go to the La Cumbre area soon, because it sounds like there's something happening with Sears building. So that will be interesting.
Yes, as you pointed out, Eric Friedman on the council discussion talked about the Sears building as if there was a real thing going to happen there.
And so did Randy Rouse.
Okay.
Yeah, they both brought it up.
Well, thank you, friends. And I would like to wish you all the happiest of holidays and Happy New Year if we don't see you before then. And I feel inspired by our getting together, and I hope that's been the effect. If you are not on our list, go to the SBCAN.org website, and you can sign up to be notified about the roundtables. And there's usually every month a roundtable in the North County as well as the South County for your added entertainment and excitement. So any other comments? If not, let's say goodbye for now. Thanks so much to Nadia and to Ken for organizing this. Thank you. Take care.